Welcome to the Progtalks by the Progspace. Welcome to the Progtalks, an interview series by the Progspace where we will be talking to musicians in all corners of the progressive music scene. Welcome to the Prog Talks with Uncle Prog once again. And today I'm excited because I have with me keyboardists David Van Pelt from the Australian band Acolyte. How are you doing, David?
Fantastic, Rona. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good here. And I'm excited to have you on because, of course, you guys are just when we are recording this, it's the day before your debut album, Entropy, releases, right? So, are you excited?
Very, absolutely. It's actually not our debut album. We had one album before, but this is kind of like for us of the current lineup. It's like our cementing album, if you know what I mean. Like, what do they call it? I think America calls it like sophomore album or something.
They do.
Yeah, all of that. But we're really excited.
Well, the reason I said that is because, of course, there is an earlier release from 2016, Shades of Black, but I saw that was titled, like there was mentioned as an EP. So in that regard, this is your debut full length, at least. Entropy is going to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so great to get it out.
Well, I'm lucky enough to have listened to it, and I have to say, people you expect something very good. It's a great album,
right.
And I'm also, people have had the chance to listen to a few of the singles because so far you've released Entropy, Clarity, and then Resentment just a few days ago. Or how has the reception been to these singles and the videos? And what can you tell us about these early teasers for the album?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. We honestly didn't know what to expect because Entropy, for example, that's almost 11 minutes long. So, we're like, how are people going to watch the first 30 seconds? They're going to watch the whole thing. And we're just so pleased to get so many people from not just here in Melbourne and Australia generally, but all over the world who tuned in and said, hey, I really like this sound. This sounds really different.
Yeah.
Which was great because we ourselves couldn't put us into a specific category. Like if someone says, you sound like a mixture of things or a blend, I'd get that. But if someone says, you're just this category, it doesn't really sum us up. So we sort of went in going, what's our market in regards to, so will heavy people like it? Will more prog people like it? And it seems like a broad audience has really enjoyed what's come so far, which is great, really great.
That's also what I'm getting, that you are... interesting to both people who are more like traditional prog rock fans, but also people who enjoy, the more progressive or maybe symphonic side of metal are enjoying your music. So, asking then the dreaded question, because not everyone who watches this might know the band. How would you describe the music of Acolyte?
That's a tough question.
It's a horrible,
early in the interview, and he's just putting it on me.
It's a horrible question, but
it's a great question. It's I've often said to people, if Steven Wilson had a relationship with Nightwish, who then had a relationship with Rainbow and Deep Purple, who then had a relationship with Europe. And you put it all in a blend, then you'd kind of get our sound. It's basically, it's definitely progressive rock, but there's elements of metal in there. There's elements of a lot of melody. So there's elements of quite sort of haunting, ethereal parts, and then some heavy metal parts as well. So it really is, I would say, the umbrella progressive rock, but with those added elements, a little bit heavier, a bit mellower in parts, all sort of blended in. But yeah, all those bands, sort of everyone's influences, well, not everyone's, but different people in the band have got different influences, and it's just
of course
merged to this.
Yeah, I think that I like that description, and I do like the inclusion of, more like, catchy rock music like Europe, because there is a catchiness and a lot of melody to your music. And also, I have to say, of course, there are some symphonic elements, but as you mentioned, when you mention a band like Nightwish, but at the same time, I feel like it's very easy for bands which have like symphonic elements and a female vocalist to be, lumped in with a certain style of symphonic metal bands. And you guys really aren't that style of music at all, in my opinion. You are more of a, like you said, Steven Wilson type atmospheric progressive rock, but with a lot of elements from all kind of diverse genres. So I think that sums it up nicely. Yeah.
It's well, you nailed it on the head too, because it was interesting. Before I joined Acolyte, I played in it was a melodic metal band, female fronted melodic metal band here in Melbourne, and we were doing a tour supporting Stradivarius. The Finnish heavy metal stars,
melodic,
And I just remember sitting there going, as much as I loved the previous band, I'm like, I'm playing in another heavy metal female-fronted band, and it was always, the whole Nightwish camp. And then when I met Acolyte and heard it, I'm like, well, this is different. And I was always searching for something different, and that's why I think all of us struggle to explain exactly what it is, because we've all wanted something different. And I think through our joint influences, we've been able to achieve that.
I find that interesting also, because what you're saying about, I think there are many symphonic metal bands, female fronted, that are very good and very interesting. But at the same time, it's a genre, just like certain other genres in metal, that is quite, restrictive. There's sort of, you do a certain thing, you sound a certain type of way in this genre of music, but with a band like Acolyte, it's much more open. I think probably you guys also, when writing your music, you have you don't have to be in the confines of, let's say, symphonic metal or progressive rock, or you are free to do a lot more. So I think that's very interesting what you say about hooking up with the Acolytes guys, and then finding somewhere where you have a bit more space for your something outside of that genre. You mentioned you mentioned the EP. I want to ask a little bit about that. In 2016 you released or the band released Shades of Black, and it's been 5 years then since before Entropy came out. And like you mentioned, there was a few other members in the band at that point. From what I could figure out, the keyboardist. So you are new, the drummer, the guitarist, which was a big part of the lineup of the original, lineup of the band. So what changed between 2016 and now, and how did you enter the band, and when did you enter the band?
It was the band I was speaking to you about before, that I played with before Acolytes. We were doing a farewell tour, because we were doing our first European tour, and Acolyte supported us. And it was at a place called the Bendigo. It was in Bendigo, and it was this 3-story place, and it was this really cool venue. And I heard Acolyte go on, and I was just captivated by it, because Morgan's voice does not sound like anyone else.
No, I agree.
It's just massive sounding. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And she had these really cool hypnotic moves on stage. And I sat there and I was like, this is different. This is actually something that's not trying to be anything.
Yeah.
Which really got me, my heartstrings, because I was like, you want to, if people are trying too hard to be a certain thing, you kind of end up replicating that certain thing, and that's great if that's what you wanted. But to me, you want to be creative and you want to have your own sounds, and that's a hard thing to find. But I could already see that they're on their way with that. And when I finished the European tour with the other band, I came back and I was just tired. It was a 3.5-month tour and I was playing the same melodic metal stuff, and I loved that genre and I still do. But I wanted something different, and I've always loved vintage keyboards, like super vintage old school sound stuff. And I just heard that in their music.
Yeah.
And, Morgan's very clever. So she won't come out and say, do you want to join the band? She'll suss you out a little bit first. And, she started, coming around. Yeah, coming around a little bit more. Do you want to hang out? Yeah, sure. Testing what's going on. And it was interesting because I didn't want to say straight up either, like, yeah, I want to join this, because I was still in the other band at the time, but we were both wanting the same thing but didn't want to say it.
I see.
So that would have been about, I reckon, 2000 and probably 2016. So right as their first album came out. So I didn't play on the first album, but they were doing their film clips. I was in, I think, their last film clip. Mm-hmm. And the current drummer, Chris, who's just phenomenal, he had been in the band for a little bit as well, not too long before I joined. And then we did lots of touring everywhere around. I think we did 4 or 5 Australian tours, and Australia's a big country, so it's not like when you do a European tour, you wake up in another place after 2 hours sometimes of driving. It's a big place. So we did, I think it was 5 Australian tours, and supported some fantastic Australian artists, as well as headlining our own shows, which was amazing. And then, we said, let's create an album that brings in everyone's strengths and not try to be something. Let's just do it the way we want to do it, and not appease this group or that group, or not appease any, not even thought of record labels. It was more like, let's create something that's truly who we are at this point in time, and then let's see how it goes. And that's pretty much how it worked. And we all brought in our influences and, just smashed it out really, really well. I wouldn't quickly do it,
Well, that segues quite nicely into the next thing I wanted to ask about, because I wanted to ask a little bit about the writing process for Entropy and how you guys work together as a band when you write music. Who writes the music, who writes the lyrics? Do you guys write together, or do you sit separately? And then, how does this process work? And also, when it seems you started writing for Entropy quite quickly then, after the EP was done.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a good question, because each band does it differently. Yeah. And we are still finding the optimal way of doing it. So Jason, the bass player, he really likes to write organically. So he wants to get into a room and we all write together. And that works for me too. I definitely like that. I tend to write stuff at home on the keys, and then we'll bring in more melodic sort of element things. Chris, the drummer, is really great at arranging. So that's actually what he does. Like, he's done a Masters of Music, and he's like this ambidextrous drummer that, sometimes he'll play left, sometimes he'll play right, just for fun. Why? I don't know, but he loves it. So and I think it's great because it's different.
It is.
So he'll arrange some of the stuff. Morgan is great at coming up with not just the melodies, but her ideas. She's very visual. So she's great at sort of sensing what the music's doing and then applying a theme to it. After hearing it, which I think is really powerful, because sometimes if a singer comes in with the lyrics, sometimes that can, I don't want to say dictate, but it can point you in a specific direction, which sometimes can be good.
Yeah, it gives a color to the music, right?
spot on. So this time we didn't have any lyrics. So it was all about the music first, and that was great. So yeah, everyone had their certain way, and even with some demos that we did, almost whole songs that we did ourselves, they were picked apart and put through like the Acolyte filter.
I see, yeah.
And like take some of my like melodic riff parts or something, because for me it always has to be a strong melody. There has to be a melody. I can't, I love melody, and it's like, so they might take a part of that, and then Jace will put down like a heavy bass riff that he's had for something, and then Chris will do some drum, and then it sort of comes together like that, you know what I mean? So very rarely is it like, here's a song and this is how it's going to stay. In fact, it's never like that. It's literally, here's a bunch of ideas, let's put it together and see how we go, which is, I loved it. I actually was invigorated by that process. And if you give and take, it's great. Sometimes it's hard if you're like, no, it has to sound like this. You learn to be open to other people's expression and be like, actually, let's try it that way. So
it's I find this creative process of how different bands work with their music is very interesting to me, and I always have to ask, because there are like you mentioned initially, there are so many different ways of doing it. So are you the kind of, songwriter that writes like lots of material and then, throws out a lot and then keeps what you like? Or are you the guy who writes something and then you sort of bend it and shape it into what you want it to be?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the that's the $1 million question, where some people can be both, some people can be for one. Personally, for me, like, I just get an idea. I get an idea and then I'll record it, and sometimes those ideas can turn into full songs. Like, I've got one at the moment that's like this 15-minute thing that's in 4 parts, and sometimes you get that. Other times I'll be like, here's a strong introduction. I don't know, for me, like, keyboards are really good for setting introductions, do you know what I mean? And creating that sort of feeling. And I'll have an introduction and then I'll be like, I've got no idea what I want to do next here. And we put it, it's how we work. It's great. And I'm sure, so many bands do this too, so it's nothing new, but we'll put it in, we've all got our separate recording systems, and then we'll put it into Dropbox.
Yeah.
And it'll be like, Dave's riff 1, Jason's riff 2.
Exactly.
And then, everyone listens to it and goes, hey, man, this part could work here. This part could work in this track here. Let's bring it in and pretty much smash it out. So I think...
And I guess also, I'm guessing when you get that things in the Dropbox like that, and suddenly there is something there from another band member that really hits you and makes you excited, right? And then you guys play off each other like that.
Spot on, absolutely. And it's great because sometimes someone's piece is the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that you're like, that's exactly what it needed. Like Jason, for example, one of the songs on the album called Idiosyncrasy, which was an idea, the bulk of it was an idea I had, this like Middle Eastern sort of Phrygian sounding thing. And I think I watched like The Mummy or, one of those shows that sort of gets you in that Middle Eastern vibe.
Another of those long songs on the album.
Yeah, exactly. Super long. And I had these ideas and I sent it to the guys. And when I listened to the demo, it's literally like early Europe stuff, very my stuff tends to be a little bit on the lighter side, not as heavy, because when I'm using keyboards, it's hard for me to go, so guitar, really heavy guitar will go here.
Of course,
But Jason was like, he listened to it and he came up with after the crazy part in the middle that sort of goes off on this like sort of chanty part, like Middle Eastern vibe, and it goes into this dun 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 really heavy riff, and he brought that to the table, and that totally changed the song because it allowed me to go, well, if we kept it my way, it would have been probably too soft. And that sort of stuff is what you need when someone's got, I've got this idea, I'm going to plug that in here, and then you just go magic.
Exactly. What about the recording process for Entropy? How was it recorded, and were there like issues because of the pandemic to get it done?
No, because the funny thing was it was actually recorded in 2018.
Oh, I see.
So it was a crazy time because we just finished doing a lot of we basically toured the Shades of Black first album EP for a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, which was great. But we all wanted something new, and we had a lot of the songs ready to go. And 2018, we made a choice. We said, all right, let's do this proper professionally. Like, let's not do just parts at home and then hope for the best. Let's actually go into a recording studio and lay everything down with like a proper Neve desk and all of that sort of stuff. We were very clear that we wanted a punchy but vintage sounds. And we didn't want it to be like, if you listen to our album compared to a lot of other albums, it's not as loud because we didn't want to be that part of the war of let's have all the dynamics like this, and compress everything so much. We wanted to have there's higher parts and there's lower parts. So we're very clear about that. So in 2018, we went to this fantastic recording studio in Melbourne called Synths, and they're just brilliant there. They had all this amazing gear. I brought in ridiculous amounts of my own gear. Like I've got my Hammond C3 organ is still at the studio. It's literally, and it's 2021 now. It's been there for that long, and we set up this deal where I'm like, well, I'm happy for other bands to use it, but if I want to come in and borrow something, and it's like, yeah, sure, no worries. So I moved house, and I was like, man, this thing weighs 150 kilograms or something. So, I brought in all of that gear, and they had a lot of gear there too. And then we just did it pretty much, I wouldn't say super organically. It wasn't like the Beatles where everyone goes into one room and does it. But, drums went in and most of us went in there and watched that. And then bass came in, then guitars, and then keyboards came in, and then Morgs came in at the end. So we're all there during the process. We couldn't, not all of us, because we worked too, couldn't, be there 100% of the time.
Exactly,
But it was great. It was a very, really enjoyable, stressful experience. Like anyone who's done like a recording session in a recording, proper recording studio, and how much you're paying, and and you're looking at your time going, all right, well, I'm up tomorrow.
Let's move this along, right? And
move this along. But everyone was super organised, which is great, because we were all we knew that it was going to be a big job, and we knew what we had in our heads of how we wanted it to sound. We knew that it wasn't going to be something that you just go in one day and go, I'm done. It was going to take a bit of time. So it was thoroughly enjoyable. If I could spend more time in a studio, I would adore it. I love it. Like I would live in one. I just love the vibe. I love it. I love all the equipment, watching other artists, listening to the music, and it's heaven.
Well, so the album then was finished in 2018, you said. So it was recorded 2018, and I went overseas I played keys in a Finnish band for a tour with a band called One Desire, which are a melodic band in Finland, and they're really, really cool guys. And it was interesting because I left. It was like late 2018, and then I came back, and I had to put, I think it was like maybe early 2019, and they said, we do some more piano parts, and I was like, yep, sure. So I think it all up, I'm pretty sure we wrapped up maybe by really super early 2019, like maybe February or March, with the hope that 2019 was going to be the year we all put it together. We all rehearsed like crazy. And then, 2020 was going to be the year. Woo! I've heard that from several bands that they had plans, things were planned for recording or done recording, and then 2020 hit and things got pushed forward, or had to be reassessed how they were going to do things. It was hard. I was just going to say it got hard because it got put back a little bit because Paul Morgan got quite sick. Oh, really?
During the process, really sick, and that actually worked I don't want to say beautifully because she went through a hell of a time, but that works amazingly in that her experience of what she went through resulted in the powerful lyrics that she wrote and also the themes to the songs. So it's interesting when I think about it that you never would want a really good friend to go through something like that, but because she did, it added the lyrics add the extra power to the already powerful songs.
And that's something that's actually part of my next question, because of course I know that Morgan-Leigh Brown, which is your fantastic vocalist, is also the lyricist and wrote most of the lyrics for this album, if not all the lyrics, from what I know. But and I've read that the album deals with the stages of loss, or at least the early stages of loss. So can you tell us a little bit about the theme or the lyrical content of the album?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure she won't mind me saying this because she's actually just put an article out about it. So Morgs got chronic fatigue and got it really, really badly, but we didn't know. And she didn't want to sort of tell us because she didn't want to freak us out that, like, oh, I'm not feeling so great and we're in the middle of recording. and we knew something was up.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what it was. And in all honesty, she didn't know what it was either at the time, because with chronic fatigue, it's one of those things where, they just try and iron out everything that it's not.
It's very hard to diagnose. It can be very hard to diagnose. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So she went through absolute hell and we were all kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah.
How's this going to work? And what that did was it caused her to sort of really look inwards and tell from her heart, like it was literally, pouring out of her how the process affected her and how the feelings of not wanting to show that something was wrong and wanting to tell people but not being able to tell people and feeling that sense of what's wrong with me, like
exactly.
I'm not who I am. All of that and that sense of loss of self of, medical experts can't tell me what's wrong and, I'm not who I am anymore. And all of that was just put into lyrics that, and I'm not saying this because I'm in the band, but when I read them, like it's so beautifully sculpted that it's almost as if you could cut and paste her physical process of what she went through and the mental process of what she went through and then put it onto paper. That's exactly what it was.
I feel like it's very noticeable in her voice as well, because there's a lot of emotion coming through on the album. You hear like, there's a feeling of desperation, and in some of the songs, and so it's quite noticeable that this is something that meant a lot to her, and that she wanted to put out through your music. So and so I think for anyone who gets into the album, you looking into the lyrics it's a big part of Entropy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so strange how things work out, and I find that you can, if someone gets sick and it's like during recording, it's so easy for you to go, oh, why did this have to happen? And blah, 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 blah. But as I said before, it was horrible experience. And she's such an amazing, strong trooper. Like she's an incredibly strong human being and just pushed through it. But as I said, like if she didn't go through that, I'm not sure how, what the lyrics would have been about. Like I'm sure they would have been fantastic because she's great at lyrics, but this and her performance, like you said, you're spot on. It's just raw. It was like, beautifully captured. I was in the, I watched, I was there for a few of the songs and it was just like, she gave it her all. Like she'd walk out of the vocal booth and almost collapse. It was, it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Well, it's noticeable on the album that this is very, that this meant a lot to her, and you can hear the emotion coming through the vocals and, adding an extra element to the music. So, another reason I think for people to listen to your stuff there. If you are enjoying this interview, please head over to theprogspace.com for more reviews, articles, pictures and interviews, all about progressive music. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. theprogspace.com. I want to move on a little bit to you and your musical background, and I want to ask you, when did you start playing the keyboards and the piano, and what's the first music you remember falling in love with?
That's such a great question. People will laugh actually, because the first I got when I was in grade 3, so I was like 6 or 7. Or 8, I don't know. I got in trouble and I got kept in at lunchtime. And instead of having the school bell like ding, 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 they had music playing instead. Which
yeah.
was great. And I remember the teacher told me off and she said, all right, you have to stay in this room, da, 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 da. And then she just left the room. And teachers can't do that these days. But back in the 80s, it was all right.
Yeah.
And of all songs, the intro to the Final Countdown by Europe came on. And I didn't know what a synthesizer was. I didn't know what a keyboard was. I couldn't play a note. And I got goosebumps when I heard that. Like it was like I think people who love music, if you get the goosebumps, then something's going on.
I agree.
I'm not a religious person, but something is telling you that this is an important moment in your life. And literally, and I'm not joking you here, I can't explain this, but I went home that night and had it in my head, and I couldn't tell you what a note was on the keyboard. I had no idea. And I literally played it note for note and was like, all of a sudden I looked at a piano and went, this makes sense. Like, all right, I need someone now to come in and tell me how it makes sense. So I got this awesome young piano teacher who came in, and he was not about reading music, but he was like, all right, so, these are sharps, these are flats and da-da-da-da-da. And, from then I was able just to listen to things and not necessarily get it note for note, but be able to play it pretty well. Yeah. So it was almost like the gene was there, that the Final Countdown of your voice songs opened it for me. I'll never, ever forget that moment. We're talking, what was it, 19, when I heard it the first time, it was like 1988, I think it was. And, you're 6 or 7, you're in a classroom, but I will never forget that moment. And, from there, it just ended up being like, okay, played piano, and then heard a keyboard and was like, oh, what's that? And then learned, all right, there's all different types of keyboards, okay. And then, played in 80s cover bands, of all things, and 80s rock cover bands, and all of the old, a lot of the old 80s bands use analog keyboards as opposed to digital. And that's when the virus just kicked in. I'm like, oh, well, I want analog stuff because it sounds so much better, And, from then, I obviously got into Europe and I looked at who their influences were, which was, a lot of UFO, Deep Purple, Rainbow. Yes. So then I got into those influences. And then naturally, Mellotrons, Fender Rhodes, Hammond C3, all of that sort of stuff sort of came forward. And at the time I was playing in a melodic metal band, and it didn't suit the music, the instruments that I loved didn't suit that.
Of course, yeah.
And then Acolyte came along and I just heard it and went, I think I could add some
there's room for it here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's room for it here. Yeah. So that was pretty much how it worked. And I've been very fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of tours with other bands overseas and make friends with other people at festivals. And then, people say, oh, would you be able to play on this or play on that? And it's an honor and a privilege to do so. Because it's always a challenge. It's never easy. Touring's never easy at all. And I've had a fantastic ride, and I'm really looking forward to repeating it with Acolyte, because we've never done any touring overseas. We've always hit Australia really hard, and I'm always like coming back going, yeah, you guys are going to love it. Da, 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 da. So I'm hoping, when things sort of get a little bit better, that will hopefully be.
That will be in the cards for the band. Yeah. Well,
that's me feel alive.
You said, Europe then unlocked those early things, but Acolyte is sort of a progressive band, I would say.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask more, about what about progressive music and progressive rock and progressive metal? How did you discover that? And are there any, I'm sure there are, but like keyboardists within that genre that informed you or maybe inspired you and your style of playing?
Absolutely. So when I got into like melodic stuff, one of the first bands I heard was Stratovarius, and I was very, very fortunate enough to do a tour supporting them in 2015, and it was a huge tour. It was three and a bit months, like 30 something shows in 26 countries. It was just crazy. It was fantastic, and that got me into a lot of more the progressive side of metal, because Jens Johansson, who is just off the charts,
fantastic,
keyboard player, just unbelievable. Like watching him every night, and I had the honor of having a drinking competition with him. Don't do that.
No, I think probably a bad idea.
Don't do that. I've never felt more sick in my life. But watching his technique, and he discussed to me like his love of different time signatures and everything, and I was like, okay. And then I got into, because my love of the vintage stuff, got into like Rick Wakeman, and he used a lot of strange time signatures with vintage keys, and that got me into super early stuff. Then from that I got into things like old school, even Weather Report, which people go, is that like a progressive band? That's like a jazz band. I'm like, no man, you've got to listen to what they're doing.
I agree. Savinul is fantastic.
He is one of my many keyboard heroes. Like what he can do is, I did an article for Prog magazine when they asked like, what are my 5 top prog rock solos, and I put Black Market by Weather Report in there, and people were like, oh, is that really a solo? I'm like, you think that it sounds easy, but what they don't realize is he had an ARP 2600, which is this lovely machine here, and he inverted the voltage, which meant that he was actually playing the solos backwards.
Wow.
I mean, who
does
why?
That?
I don't know. But I watched it live. Like I wasn't there. I wasn't even born. But I watched on a video, and I'm like, hang on, the higher notes are lower on the keyboard.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? And he's like, I wanted to, the way he used to speak, like, man, I just want to make a challenge for the brain. It's like insane.
Yeah. And the end result is fantastic, of course.
It's just brilliant. And then from there, Chick Corea and Return to Forever,
of course,
amazing bands, which just I adore. And then through a lot of the Acolyte crew, they then got me into other bands like Steven Wilson, and I was always aware of Dream Theater, because naturally everyone goes, Dream Theater, you must love Dream Theater.
Yeah.
I do, but Jordan Rudess is, I think, one of the greatest musical teachers, especially keyboard teachers, you could hope for. His stuff is amazing. But it's interesting, as a player, I like more live performances, and his technicality is so brilliant. But for me, I like a bit more rock out with it, you know what I mean? And I don't want to have a music chart in front of me. Just go at it hardcore. So they never captured me as much as people sort of think, but I have nothing but respect for them, because their musicianship is absolutely
that's fantastic. Yeah.
Just next level.
You mentioning those vintage keyboards and all your vintage equipment then, I wanted to ask, you're a enthusiast, a collector of this stuff. So would you, and I see you have some nice things behind you, so would you tell us a little bit about what you have and how you used it on the album?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can actually, I'm watching. Wow.
Yeah.
So this one here is a Mini Moog Model D, which basically has got a filter in it that really hasn't been beaten. It's just amazing, and it is pretty much all over Entropy, because the high frequency content of it, it just cuts. So there's a huge synth solo at the end of Acceptance, which is the last track, and it goes for like 2 and a bit minutes, which is so lovely as a synth player to be able to be given that. So I'm like, woo. And that I use that pretty much over absolutely everything, because it sounds so, everyone says fat, but it just sounds so organic. That
it's a beautiful, warm sound, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how it can be that it's just like transistors and resistors and all of that gear. I don't get it, because it just sounds alive.
Yeah.
So it's great, and I use that live a lot. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep using it live, because I just got a new toy the other day, so we'll have to see. But I'm never getting rid of it, because it's absolutely gorgeous. So pretty much, actually, in fact, all of the solos were done using that, which is brilliant. And I just move around. You've got my lovely Jaws 3 poster, which is a terrible movie, but somehow I just got the poster. This one here is what's called an ARP Odyssey. Yep. And I've funny got my ARP t-shirt on. I love this thing. Like, it's probably, in all honesty, besides my new one, my favorite, just because it can do so many things. Whereas like the Mini Moog is just unbelievable. It always sounds like a Mini Moog. You can't hide the Moog sounds. Whereas
no.
ARP stuff, it's not as ballsy as a Moog, but you can make it sing or scream simply by pushing the faders. Like, it's so easy, and I can visualize it and know exactly what the sound is, because I hate presets. Like, I don't like pressing a button and then being like, okay, there's the sound. And I'm just selling a synth now that I used for some shows, because they had presets, and I'm like, it didn't feel right. I'm like, no, this is not what I'm about. So that was used a lot on Entropy for a lot of, I think it did some bass sound, some leads, but mostly really weird special effects.
Yeah.
There's one track on Entropy that's basically all crazy special effects, like all synth stuff that, man, if you had 2 hours, what I did to create that was just insane. It was just through experimentation.
I see.
We finished the keys early, and we're like, the producer said, we've got some time, and I'm like, cool, I've got this idea.
Let's play around a bit, yeah.
Let's play around for a bit. And underneath that is what's called Prophet Rev 2, which is created by a fantastic brand called Sequential, and they actually released the Prophet 5 in 1978, which was the first programmable polyphonic synth. Sound killer, 18 voices, pure analog. You play, say 8 notes, and it's just, whoa. So we're thinking album 3 with that one.
I see.
And then over here, I just picked this up the other day. So what we've got here is what's called an ARP 2600. And this is pretty much going to be, as crazy as it sounds, my live lead synth. It's massive. It's you've got patch cables and everything, but it's kind of like the Odyssey on steroids, and I love the ARP sound. And these guys sold out. I think Korg reissued 2600s, and they sold out before they were even available in stores. And then the one guy that I go to in Australia who has all of the high-end gear, he contacted me and said, I've got something you might like. And I was like, oh. And I had a feeling what it was. Yeah. And then I'm like, heart, bank balance, heart 1. So it's literally, it's 1 day old. So I've just been playing
around with it. And
yeah, because it's got a built-in sequencer, and but it's the sound, like it all runs through like a vintage spring reverb. Like there's no digital thing in it at all. Like you've got to create everything from scratch, which scares the crap out of a lot of my bandmates, because there's a lot of happy accidents that can happen with analog gear, you know.
That's
like,
something
never.
That's something I wanted to ask about. You know, is there, taking stuff like this on the road, you know, it might be more fragile. It might be, it's like you say, it's big, it's heavy. Are there, of course, there must be challenges to using this stuff in a live setting.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So it's almost like you need to know the music inside out, because the biggest challenge is you're actually wrestling with all the gear. So like, to change going from a bass sound to like a lead sound, you've got to change all of the frequency sliders. If you want some resonance to make it scream a little bit, you change that. These patch cables are going to determine what waveform that I'm using. And naturally, I'm not just going to have saw waves all the time, square, sine, whatever. So you've got to think ahead, but also you've got to look at the panel and sort of analyze what the sound's doing. Like, what are the envelopes set up like? So how's the sound going to travel? What tone color am I using? Where's the filter set? Is it aggressive? Am I doing soft lyrical things? But there's something about that it makes you connect with the instruments.
Of course.
And that's real. That's, to me, that's so important. Whereas I'm selling a Moog Subsequent 37, which is a fantastic, it's actually like a modern classic. It's fantastic synth. And I made all of the sounds on it for live use. But it was like, bang, next song, bang, and I can't do it. I just couldn't do it. I wish I could. It's easier.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier. It's a lot more dependable. It's a lot more reliable. Costs a lot less.
Yeah.
But what's that saying? The heart wants what the heart wants, man.
Exactly.
I sell stuff, so it's like this is how I justify it to my wife. I'm like, I did buy this, but I sold something else. So
it's It evens out. Well, it's probably not fair. It's probably not fair of me to ask this question then, because since you're sitting here next to your new keyboard that you're, so excited about, but I just have to ask then: is there like a particular model you would love to own that still eludes you? Something that you'd really love to get your hands on?
That's such a great question. Absolutely. I mean, this one was one I wanted for years and years and years, and just thought never would happen when Korg sold out of all of them. And the secondhand market now is selling the old school ones for over $12,500, and I'm like, that's no. I would money. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bucket load of cash. But people want to relive when they had one. So hey, I'm all for it. If you're gonna, as long as it's used, I don't want to go into a museum and it's just like stuck there, like,
or just with a collector, just putting it in a
Yeah, I would love to have, if I was ever able to actually use one. It's what's called a Selena string ensemble, and it was a beautiful, beautiful sounding instrument that bands like Pink Floyd really went to town with. Who else? Jean-Michel Jarre.
Jarre,
massive fan. He used like an Eminent and something else, and he used the Selena string ensemble. It's just got this. I used it actually on Entropy for the soft sounds underneath the keyboards, the longer keyboard solo in the single Entropy. It's just unmistakable sounds, and it's so simple in its sound, but if you run it through like a small stone phaser, it's gorgeous. It's magical. That's something I would love to see if someone ever brought back. That would be great. And obviously you've got mellotrons, and I'd love to use a real mellotron for recording. I'd never take one out live.
No.
Yeah, but that sound is just, there's mellotrons all over the whole Entropy album because I love it.
It reminds me of, a while back I did an interview with Norwegian band Wobbler, and they are very much doing, their whole sound is about these vintage instruments. I'm sure you'd hit it off great with Lars, which is their keyboardist. He's also a collector of old stuff. And they told me about this, in the beginning of their career, they wanted to try and, they said no to a lot of live requests because they couldn't transport their instruments, which was, of course, Hammonds and Mellotrons and all this stuff. And they eased up on that. But, I can totally see how someone like you also would love to be able to bring all of this equipment onto stage and actually perform with it live, right? But it's especially traveling overseas, you have to find other solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, I could never transport that overseas. Like, I'll definitely use it around Australia because it comes in this amazing flight case and it's protected, which is amazing. But to ship it would cost an arm and a leg, and it's not like it's going to be, you can't just go to a store now and go, can we hire one of those? I'll probably take the Odyssey or something like that. I keep adding more stuff to the library just to, honestly, one, I love it, but two, I love pissing off our guitarist Brandon because, he gets some solos and I get a lot of solos, and like there's this sort of joking rivalry between us. And it's great because, he'll try and do a solo and I'll try and out-solo him.
Of course.
Then, I'll bring in this, which is like this. He hasn't seen it yet. Like, he's going to freak out. I can't wait. And like with like 3 oscillators and I can drop the octaves by 2 just by flicking it. You just hit one note. Whoa.
Yeah, exactly. And you get that.
Yeah, and then you open the filter, and I'm like the frequency spectrum, and he can't compete with it.
It's not fair to the guy, really, is it?
No, it's not really, but it's like they say, you've got to go into war with your best weapon.
Yeah, so. I think that's correct. Well, we're coming up on towards the end of the interview here, but I want to ask you guys about the future plans now for Acolyte. The chances you talked about going on the road, using your equipment live. What plans do you have to take Entropy to the stage now that the pandemic is finally winding down a bit? And also, I've heard some rumors that there are some online live stuff coming up soon. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So, we've got a fantastic release coming up shortly that's just being sort of finalised at the moment, which is a live show that we shot here in Melbourne, and we go through all new tracks from the new album. We don't play the whole album, but we play, I'd say, definitely the vast majority of it.
The majority of it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be great for people to see how we perform this live, because it is a challenge to perform it live because there's so much to it. But we had an absolutely fantastic time. It was nerve-wracking because whenever you're doing a live show, there's a key word in that, live show.
Exactly, yeah.
So, it's that sort of warts and all. Nothing's completely perfect, but it all turned out really, really great. So that's going to be coming out, I believe, in a week or so, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But I know there'll definitely be some promotion done about that, which, I really, anyone who's a fan of our music who would like to check us out and hasn't had the opportunity to see us live because we haven't toured overseas, please definitely check it out. I think you will enjoy it. It's
agree.
A great capture of what we can do in a live situation with, very minimalist setup. I couldn't bring in 14 keyboards or any of that, So it's really good. What I've seen of it so far looks really fantastic. So that'll be coming out shortly. In terms of touring and everything, we want to tour like crazy. We've been wanting to do it for a long time. I think things in Australia, COVID-wise, are going well. In regards to very few, if any, outbreaks, and most of the positive cases are in hotel quarantine.
Yeah,
which is fantastic in that, things are starting to open up a little bit. Live music's definitely starting to come back, which is great. Great. Realistically, I would say we'd be doing some live circuit around Australia first, and then I'm hoping that this is very selfish of me to say this, but I'm really hoping, first of all, that, for obviously human life, that things get better in Europe.
Of course.
And that, everything starts, vaccinations start to come quick and fast, so that we can all return to what I think everyone really wants is normality.
I agree, yeah.
Because we selfishly, like I can't wait to get over to Europe to say, catch up with friends who I haven't seen in 2 years, and to go with the band and share the music with everyone. But yeah, all of the stars have to align for a lot of that to happen. Yeah. But we're hopeful. We're very hopeful. We're very positive. We've got absolutely outstanding manager in Lulu. She's just brilliant. We've got a great record label behind us. So, with hope and a bit of luck, I think, it should go well.
That's what I'm hoping for too. I can't wait to see you guys live on stage here in Europe somewhere. Hopefully that will happen in not too far in the future, that opportunity will come for you guys, and this will be more possible here as well. And so, well, I want to thank you so much, David, for being on the Progtalks with me.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and for you who are watching this, you should go and follow Acolyte on all their social medias. You find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you haven't listened to Entropy yet, because by the time this is out, the album, of course, has released. And you should definitely go and listen to Entropy, which can be found, I guess, on all typical streaming platforms. Or you could go to Wild Thing Records and buy the thing, which I would say it's absolutely worth it to buy the album. So, so thank you for watching and listening. And if you enjoyed today's interview, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot at the Progspace. And keep spreading that prog love. The Progtalks, produced by the Progspace. Main host, Rune Belsvik-Reinås. Produced by Rune Belsvik-Reinås, Vanessa and Matthias Kirsch. All graphics and animations by Vanessa Kirsch. Intro theme by Giuseppe Negri. Outro theme by Zach Munowitz. This was the Progtalks by the Progspace. See you in a week.